Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We're breaking with convention. I'm Amy Goodman. Senator Kamala Harris has accepted the Democratic vice presidential nomination, becoming the first woman of color to run on a major party presidential ticket. Harris is the daughter of immigrants, an Indian mother and a Jamaican father. She accepted the nomination on the third day of the virtual Democratic National Convention, on an evening filled with the voices of women speaking about gun violence, immigration, climate crisis, domestic violence, and more. Former President Barack Obama spoke just before Harris accepted the nomination, warning President Trump poses a grave threat to American democracy.
This administration has shown it will tear our democracy down if that's what it takes for them to win.
Later in the broadcast, we'll air extended excerpts of Senator Harris's acceptance speech and other voices from the DNC. In California, hundreds of wildfires triggered by lightning strikes have exploded in size, fanned by gusty winds and record-high temperatures driven by the climate crisis. Governor Gavin Newsom has declared a statewide emergency and mobilized the National Guard.
We are experiencing fires, the likes of which we haven't seen in many, many years. The totality, when you consider 367 active fires that we are aware of all across the state of California.
Thick smoke from the fires has blanketed parts of Northern California, including the Bay Area, where fires have consumed over 124,000 acres and are threatening tens of thousands of structures. Air quality in parts of the region Wednesday registered as the worst in the world, with residents urged to remain inside with their windows and doors closed. Meanwhile, California's reliance on prison labor has led to a shortage of fire crews. Prison officials have placed 12 of California's 43 prisoner fire camps on lockdown due to a massive outbreak of COVID-19 at a Northern California prison that serves as a training center for prisoners who are paid just $1 an hour to fight blazes. To see our special on the prisoner fire camps, you can go to democracynow.org. The United States recorded nearly 1,300 new coronavirus deaths and 43,000 new cases Wednesday, with Georgia, Florida, and Texas leading the U.S. in per capita infections. The official U.S. death toll stands at over 173,000. 6 months into the U.S. epidemic, healthcare workers report they're continuing to struggle to obtain personal protective equipment as churches, schools, and businesses drive demand for limited supplies of N95 respirator masks and other safety gear. Tests around the country are in short supply. Here in New York City, the head of the teachers union said Wednesday members are ready to call in sick or go on strike if schools reopen for in-person classes before teachers feel safe. Michael Mulgrew is president of the United Federation of Teachers.
The minute we feel that the mayor is trying to force people into a situation that is unsafe, we go. We go to court, we go to job action. That's where we go.
New York Mayor Bill de Blasio fired back, warning the teachers union against any labor actions that aren't allowed under its collective bargaining agreement with the city.
Look, any union leader who talks about doing something illegal should really think twice about what he's saying.
Mayor de Blasio has yet to commit to a schedule for the fall school year, but has strongly suggested he's prepared to order some classrooms to reopen on September 10th under a blended model that combines in-person and distance learning. New Zealand has deployed 500 additional soldiers to patrol quarantine hotels after at least 75 people became infected with the coronavirus in the capital, Auckland, during New Zealand's first outbreak in more than 100 days. Zambia's 79-year-old vice president tested positive for COVID-19 Wednesday and went into self-isolation. At least 15 Zambian lawmakers have contracted the coronavirus, and 2 of them died of COVID-19. In Europe, Spain, France, and Croatia have recorded their highest rates of infection since ending strict lockdowns earlier this year. Meanwhile, in Sweden, health officials recorded the nation's highest 6-month death toll in over 150 years during the first half of 2020. This week, journalists obtained emails showing Sweden's top epidemiologist pushed to keep schools open so that children would spread COVID-19 and push the population toward herd immunity. He also asked a colleague whether a higher death rate among seniors might be acceptable. In Iran, the official death toll from COVID-19 passed the 20,000 mark, even as education officials plan to administer university entrance exams to over 1 million students. Iran's surge in cases came as President Trump threatened to use a procedural maneuver to reimpose United Nations sanctions against Iran, something European powers insist the U.S. does not have the authority to do. In Belarus, mass protests are continuing more than a week after longtime authoritarian leader Alexander Lukashenko was declared the winner of a controversial presidential election. On Wednesday, European Union rejected the election results, and the EU is expected to soon impose sanctions on individuals connected to the election and the repression of protesters. This is Charles Michel, the president of the European Council.
Our message is very clear. Stop the violence, and we don't accept the impunity.
In Russia, opposition activist Alexei Navalny fell ill and collapsed during a flight from Siberia to Moscow, forcing the plane to make an emergency landing in Omsk, where he was rushed to a hospital and placed on a ventilator. A doctor said the 44-year-old Kremlin critic remains in serious condition. Passengers say Navalny became violently ill after he was photographed drinking tea at an airport cafe shortly before boarding the flight, raising the prospect he was poisoned. In the Gaza Strip, Israeli tanks shelled Hamas positions overnight in a 9th consecutive night of violence as Palestinians continued to launch incendiary balloons into Israeli territory. In the occupied West Bank, thousands of Palestinians rallied Wednesday to protest Israel's agreement normalizing ties with the United Arab Emirates in a deal brokered by the Trump administration. At least 3 Palestinians were wounded as Israeli troops fired tear gas. Joe Biden's campaign has disavowed Palestinian-American activist Linda Sarsour after she appeared at the Muslim Delegates and Allies Assembly side event at the Democratic National Convention. On Tuesday, the Biden campaign attacked Sarsour over her support for the BDS movement, which seeks to boycott, sanction, and divest from Israel over its treatment of Palestinians and its illegal occupation of the West Bank. Biden campaign spokesperson Andrew Bates told CNN, quote, Joe Biden has been a strong supporter of Israel and a vehement opponent of anti-Semitism his entire life, and he obviously condemns her views and opposes BDS, as does the Democratic platform. She has no role in the Biden campaign whatsoever, he said. On Wednesday, the DNC aired a video titled America Rising, Women's Suffrage to Women's March, featuring footage of the movement that Linda Sarsour co-founded. She tweeted in response, quote, when the DNC uses footage of my labor at the Women's March to make themselves seem relevant while throwing my communities under the bus, you can't make this up, she said. Meanwhile, Adi Barkan, the American-Israeli lawyer with terminal ALS, who was a featured speaker at the Democratic National Convention on Tuesday, called the Biden campaign's attack on Sarsour a vile and dishonest statement. Adi Barkan tweeted, quote, Linda is a fierce advocate for justice and freedom and a leading anti-racist and organizer against anti-Semitism. The Biden campaign must retract and apologize, Adi Barkan tweeted. President Trump has openly embraced supporters of the far-right conspiracy theory, QAnon, describing them as people that love our country. He also refused to question the central plank of the conspiracy theory when questioned by a reporter at the White House.
At the crux of the theory is this belief that you are secretly saving the world from this satanic cult of pedophiles and cannibals. Does that sound like something you are behind? Or
well, I haven't heard that, but is that supposed to be a bad thing or a good thing? I mean, you know, if I can help save the world from problems, I'm willing to do it.
Meanwhile, Facebook has removed nearly 800 QAnon groups as part of a broader purge. Facebook also removed several prominent anti-fascist and anarchist pages, including ones connected to the site's crimethink.com and itsgoingdown.org, which criticized the purge, saying, quote, suppressing the voices of those who seek to protect their communities from institutional and white supremacist violence is an intentional decision to normalize violence as long as the ones employing it hold institutional power, unquote. The Supreme Court said Wednesday it will hear the Trump administration's challenge to the Affordable Care Act on November 10th, exactly 1 week after the presidential election. The Justice Department's continuing its case to have the Obama-era health care law struck down as unconstitutional, even as an estimated 27 million Americans lost their employer-based health insurance during the coronavirus crisis. A ruling's expected sometime next spring. In Ohio, the Cincinnati Reds Major League Baseball team has suspended veteran broadcaster Tom Brenneman after he was caught on a hot mic making an anti-gay slur. Brenneman's comment on Fox Sports Ohio came after a commercial break during a doubleheader Wednesday between the Reds and the Kansas City Royals. Later in the broadcast, Brenneman issued this apology before handing over his duties to another play-by-play announcer.
I made a comment earlier tonight that I guess went out over the air that I am deeply ashamed of.
In a statement, Cincinnati's baseball team said, quote, the Reds organization is devastated by the horrific homophobic remark. And those are some of the headlines. But this last headline, the state of Michigan has reportedly reached a deal to pay out about $600 million to victims of the water crisis in Flint. The crisis began in 2014 when Flint's unelected emergency manager, appointed by then-Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, switched the source of the city's drinking water in order to save money. The move has been linked to at least 12 deaths from an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease, as well as widespread lead poisoning in residents, including many children. Tens of thousands of Flint residents are expected to be eligible to receive money from the settlement. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We're breaking with convention. I'm Amy Goodman in New York with Nermeen Sheikh sheltering at home. Hi, Nermeen.
Good morning, Amy, and welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.